Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. We start today on hadith number 96, Babu Samari fil Ilm, a chapter about knowledge in the nighttime, meaning learning, reading, teaching during the night. عن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال صلى بنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم العشاء في آخر حياته فلما سلم قام فقال أرأيتكم ليلتكم هذه فإن على رأس 100 سنة منها لا يبقى ممن هو على ظهر الأرض أحد أي من الحاضرين. In this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ prayed Aisha, and Abdullah is saying that this was towards the end of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. After Salah, the Prophet ﷺ said, 100 years will not pass except that none of you will be alive. Right? So here the Prophet ﷺ is making a prophecy, basically saying that, in fact, it's not just the people who are there. He said, no one who's walking on the earth today will be alive in 100 years. So if an infant had been born hours before the Prophet ﷺ said this, the infant will not pass 100 years. Right? So there's a prophecy, and it begs the question, what's the point? You can't really test this. Like, there's no way of us proving that the Prophet ﷺ, what he said was right. There's no way you need like a census for this. That's long gone. Well, of course, as people who believe the Prophet ﷺ, we believe him. But why did he say this? What's the point? Imagine you're sitting there and the Prophet ﷺ, you just finished Isha prayer, turns around, all of a sudden he says this, hey, nobody's going to be alive after 100 years. It really begs the question, why did he say this, and really what's the point? Personally, I don't know of anything that clarifies why he said it. Maybe there were discussions happening before, like how long will you live, how long will this person live? And so the Prophet ﷺ contributed to that conversation, saying that no one will be alive within 100 years. Now for the companions who were living then, they would have been able to see this come to light, that the oldest of them, the one who lives closest to 100 years from that time, will have seen the Prophet ﷺ said this and it's come true. So increase of iman for them. But for us, maybe the purpose here is how far in the future do we see ourselves? Well, when will I live? Till how long? Is it possible that some of us, one of us, none of us live 100 or beyond? It's very possible, right? It's not strange these days. Like when you hear somebody's 105 years old, you say, oh wow, mashallah, but it's not that strange, right? But how long will you live? So perhaps the purpose of what the Prophet ﷺ said is not so much the time, but the mindset. Instead of saying you will live this long, the Prophet is saying you're not going to live this long. And there's a slight difference in terms of perception. If I'm looking at my life and saying how long will I live, that's one way of seeing the world, versus I probably won't live this long. That's a whole different way, right? When you think, okay, I have 1 month to study for this test, versus I don't have that much time to study for this test. Which of these two mindsets is going to encourage you to study ASAP? The second one. Like, I don't have that much time left, right? So perhaps maybe this is the point. It's this creation of the mindset. How do you look at your life? Don't look at it in terms of, I have this much time left, right? Oh, the average life expectancy these days, early 80s. I'm X years old. Oh, I still have 30, 40 years. I have 20 years left. Oh, that's still a lot of time. Versus, I might not live to 83. A whole different ballgame, right? So perhaps, that's the wisdom behind it. But in relationship to the chapter's title, it's about the Prophet ﷺ even utilized the nighttime to spread knowledge. And I believe I've already shared this with you all, but in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that he encourages us to go to sleep after Isha prayer. And there's really nothing worth your time. You're better off sleeping to get up for Fajr or to get up for Qiyam al-Layl except for three things. There are three things that are actually worth staying up for. One is having a conversation with your spouse, or spending time with your spouse. Two, hosting a guest. And three, seeking knowledge. These are the best ways you can utilize your evenings. And so in our times today, when, people normally go to sleep, average around 11 o'clock, maybe even 12 o'clock. Few people go to sleep before 11. Maybe somebody, if they work very early mornings, that's when they go. And it's normal to hear, oh, I slept at 1, 2, 3, and whatnot, these younger ones. Right? To say that, oh, go to sleep after Isha prayer, especially in the winter time when Isha is like 5:30, right? It's like, why don't we go to sleep now? It's too early, right? So don't take it in a sense that, I should criticize myself if I'm staying up after Isha prayer, but rather we should see it in the sense that, okay, what is the best use of my time after Isha prayer? Utilize it for these things. It's very healthy to spend quality time with your family after Isha prayer. That's good. Even if what you're doing is you have popcorn, you're watching a movie, it's family time still, right? Or seeking knowledge or hosting a guest, encouraging that relationship building, something that we don't have here in California. Oh, everything's so busy and it's just nobody's connected, right? And look, I understand that there's a reason why a lot of people have withdrawn socially. I don't want all the drama. I don't want this stuff. And that's very valid, by the way. But we've gone to another extreme, at least here in SoCal. And that is, there's no relationships. How often do you invite people to your home? Right? In Chicago, where I come from, that's the only thing, there's nothing else to do. So people are always visiting. There's a type of environment, but it's boring outside of that. Here, it's very fun outside, but we do that and we never engage with people. That's why you don't really find community here in SoCal, in the masajids. Everybody does their own entertainment with their own families. There are pros and cons, of course. The idea is there's a good way of utilizing your time after Isha, among which is seeking knowledge, reading, family time, or hosting a guest. And there are less useful ways of using your time after Isha. عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال بت في بيت خالتي ميمونة بنت الحارث, the wife of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, وكان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عندها في ليلتها فصلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم العشاء ثم جاء إلى منزله فصلى 4 ركعات ثم نام ثم قام ثم قال نام الغليم أو كلمة تشبهها ثم قام فقمت عن يساره فجعلني عن يمينه فصلى 5 ركعات ثم صلى ركعتين ثم نام حتى سمعت غطيطه أو خطيته ثم خرج إلى الصلاة. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma said that he slept over at his aunt's house. His aunt being Maymuna, who was the wife of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So he slept over by his aunt's house, and the Prophet was there as well. And he says that the Prophet prayed Isha prayer. So he was in the masjid, prayed Isha, came home, and he prayed 4 rak'ahs. Immediately, after a few hours, we don't know, but the idea is that he prayed 4 rak'ahs after Isha. Then he slept. And then he got up to pray some more. And of course, Ibn Abbas is very young at this time. He's probably 9 years old, something like that. So there's only so much he can do to wake up at night. But, he's kind of in and out. And he heard the Prophet ﷺ say, this young boy is asleep, he's not getting up. My son says, whenever he hears about suhoor, in Ramadan, he's like, wake me up. We try waking up. Sometimes he wakes up, sometimes he doesn't. So Ibn Abbas, in the middle of the night, he didn't get up. But he heard. He heard the Prophet say. So the Prophet got up, prayed some more. And then Ibn Abbas kind of mustered the energy, got up and started praying with the Prophet. And he stood to the left of the Prophet. As the Prophet is praying, Ibn Abbas stood to the left. So the Prophet took him and gently put him on his right. So we know that if you're praying with one other person, you stand to the right of that person. So the Imam is on the left, and then the one next to him is on the right. Now, if somebody comes in and they pray on the left, is their salah valid? The salah is valid. Right? The salah is valid, nothing wrong there, but the sunnah is to be on the right. Right?
And can one also move them, right?
What's that?
Can the one who's like the single person who was paid to start with, can he pull them over?
Yeah, that's what the Prophet did.
Yeah.
So the Prophet pulled them from behind.
From
behind him, yes. Right. And then the Prophet prayed 5 rak'ahs. So we know he prayed 4, and then he prayed 5. So a total of 9. Well, we know that Ibn Abbas was asleep for part of it, so maybe he prayed an extra 2. It was the habit of the Prophet to normally pray 11. That would be his norm. That's why Taraweeh prayers in a lot of masajid are a total of 11 rak'ahs if you include Shafa' and Witr. It's basing it off the Prophet's norm when it comes to Qiyam al-Layl. But it came in 4 rak'ahs and then a pause. It seems like 2 rak'ahs and then a pause and then 5 rak'ahs including Witr. Now, in another hadith, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha explains that sometimes the Prophet would pray in sets of 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and then Witr. Sometimes in sets of 4, 4 and 4, and then Witr. And sometimes he'd pray all of it at once. He'd pray 11 rak'ahs back to back with only 1 tashahhud at the end. Right? All are valid. All are valid.
So all the
Right?
10 will make the shafa without.
All shafa' is not a real, like it's not a real word. It's a word that culturally people say. Shafa' means a pair or even. Witr means odd. So, you know, at the end of Taraweeh, we have to say Salat al-Shafa'. That's not a fiqhi term. Right? It's part of Witr. The idea is that you end your night with an odd number of rak'ahs. Right? Why? Because in Allah witr, yuhibbul witr. Allah is odd, meaning He's one. He loves things to end on odd numbers, right? To replicate that. Now, if you don't end on an odd number, is everything okay? Yes. But you get extra reward if you end on a witr number, an odd number.
Every 2 they have to do the tashahhud or?
No. Just back to back. He prayed 11 rak'ahs and only did tashahhud once at the end. That's it. All are valid. The Prophet did them all. So in Ramadan, when Sheikh Majdi, he prayed 3 in a row, people got all confused. What's this? We're not used to it. I told them, don't do it. People don't know. He did it. All right? And people got confused. Right? He tried explaining before. I guess people don't pay attention, or they didn't understand, or they're not listening. It's not Shafi'i, Hanafi, or anything like that. Right? It just, all is valid.
Yasser used to pray all the time the 3 together. We never prayed 2 and 1. They should pray that they're used to it.
Sheikh Yasser is old news. Like, this is bad. People forgot.
No, he's not.
People forgot. That's like history. You're writing the history books of OCIF. Right? You think people remember from 7 years ago, 8 years ago? It's fine.
How long has he been actually?
He's been gone for 8 years.
So you can actually do 11 rak'ahs?
Back to back.
No tashahhud.
The only one at the end.
Can we do that at Tarawih at home?
No, we're going to do it as people know it. So we don't create the confusion.
No. At home.
Oh, at home, yeah, perfectly fine.
When you're doing Tarawih by yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's perfectly fine. Right. And then, after praying the 9 or 11 rak'ahs, Ibn Abbas says he prayed 2 more rak'ahs. So he prayed 11, and he prayed 2. No, so the idea here is now that he prayed after witr. A common question, I prayed witr. Shaykh, at Taraweeh I prayed witr, now I'm coming to Qiyam, can I still pray? The answer is yes. Your salah doesn't end because you prayed witr. The idea of witr is that the amount of rak'ahs you pray at night ends in an odd number. Now yes, it's better to have the last rak'ah, the odd one. To keep witr till the end. That's best. But if you pray, and then you get up to pray some more later, perfectly fine. Go ahead and pray. Right? Or the way we can understand this is that the 2 rak'ahs Ibn Abbas is talking about is the sunnah of Fajr. That the Prophet prayed his witr before the adhan of Fajr. Adhan of Fajr came in, so he prayed 2 rak'ahs for Fajr. And then he slept until he went out for Fajr prayer. So we know that the Prophet's practice, alayhi salatu wasalam, is that after he prayed Fajr, Sunnah of Fajr, he would take a light nap and then get up for Fajr Salah. In our times, don't do that because you're not getting up for Fajr. Right? I don't know how they used to do it, or because they used to sleep really early in comparison to us. If you sleep at 8 o'clock, yeah, you're waking up at 4 easily. Easy, if not before that. But in our times, please, if you get up for Fajr, pray it off. Don't go back to sleep.
So I've heard that there was a time between Sunnah and Fajr where the Prophet would lie.
Yes, that's what we're talking about.
Down. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's what we're talking about. So you'd lie down, maybe doze off a little bit.
No, even on the prayer sujood, maybe when somebody sit down. Not.
Like when exactly?
That's what I heard in a class somewhere, that he would actually, just put his head down to his tasbih and then get up and do.
Maybe. I mean, Uthman radiallahu ta'ala an would be, as a Khalifa, between Maghrib and Isha, he would sit in the masjid laying down. He'd lay down in the masjid, do dhikr. And when he needs anything, they know where to find him. All right. Babu Hifz al-Ilm, a chapter about preserving knowledge. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال إن الناس يقولون أكثر أبو هريرة ولولا آيتان في كتاب الله ما حدثت حديثا ثم يتلو إن الذين يكتمون ما أنزلنا من البينات والهدى إلى قوله الرحيم إن إخواننا من المهاجرين كان يشغلهم الصفق بالأسواق وإن إخواننا من الأنصار كان يشغلهم العمل في أموالهم وإن أبا هريرة كان يلزم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لشبع بطنه ويحضر ما لا يحضرون ويحفظ ما لا يحفظون. Here, Abu Hurairah says the following. He says, people are saying about me that I say a lot of hadith. I narrate a lot of hadith. In our times today, people still say this. They doubt Abu Hurairah. How can Abu Hurairah have memorized so much hadith? Okay. Abu Hurairah has narrated about 5,200 hadith. Right? 5,200 hadith. And people today, they come and say that that's impossible. It's not logical. Okay, why not? Abu Hurairah accepted Islam around 7 Hijrah, meaning he was with the Prophet for a mere 3 or 4 years. Okay? So he memorized all of that hadith in 3 or 4 years. They say that that's illogical. Number 2, people who are with the Prophet ﷺ for much longer, for 23 years, like Abu Bakr, like Ali, like Uthman, didn't narrate a fraction of that. So there's a discrepancy here. Now in our times today, when people come out and say this, some religious people will get very offended and they'll start attacking. You hypocrite, you this and you that, how dare you question and whatnot. Here, what do we see? The companions began to question Abu Hurairah. Abu Hurairah, how do you know so much? You weren't with us that long. So, is it okay to critique? The answer is yes. It's not okay to be disrespectful. Now, the people who come and they throw these questions at Abu Hurairah, they are rarely well-intending. These are more the people who have an agenda to try and debunk hadith to damage Islam. Right? That's what they're trying to do. And we need to put those people in their place. That's just disrespectful. But if somebody out of curiosity or out of inquiry of knowledge asked this question, there's nothing wrong with it. The companions asked it, right? So Abu Hurairah addresses this and says, people are saying Abu Hurairah has narrated so much hadith. And he says the following: had it not been for 2 verses in the Quran, I would not narrate a single hadith. I don't want to. He doesn't do it because he likes it. And what are the 2 verses? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who conceal information that Allah has sent down. Allah threatens, He warns these people. So Abu Hurairah is saying this verse is placing the responsibility on my shoulders to narrate to you all what Allah, what the Messenger has taught me. It's an amana, it's a trust. I have been entrusted with this, and to fulfill that trust, I am now narrating this to you all. That's why. Had I not been responsible to do this, you wouldn't hear this from me. Meaning, he learned from the Prophet for his own benefit, for his own self-development. And this is the beautiful mindset. When we seek knowledge, what are you seeking exactly? The point of knowledge, initially, is to build yourself specifically in relationship to Allah. That's what. How can I submit to Allah? What can I do to please Allah? It's about me and Allah. That's the point of knowledge, initially. But once you have learned that knowledge and are now capable of transmitting that knowledge, you do have a responsibility, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. O you who believe, protect yourselves and your families from the hellfire. Ibn Abbas says, teach your families and discipline them. So as parents, we have a responsibility of teaching our children the religion, the best of our ability in terms of what we know, right? We only know so much. So we do have that responsibility. Abu Hurairah is asserting, like, this is why I'm telling you. And then he explains how he was able to get more hadith than these other people. Why not Abu Bakr? Why not Aisha? Why not Ali? And Abu Hurairah says, my brothers from the Muhajirin were busy with trade, with business. Mecca is a business hub. They were business people. And they say one of the reasons why Quraysh was named Quraysh is like a small shark. Comes from the word qirsh, shark. And even in our times today, in the business world, a shark is what?
Yeah.
Somebody who tries to get a good deal, a bite out of something, right? So Meccans were business people. That was their economy. So the Muhajirin were busy with business. As Abu Hurairah says, يَشْغَلُهُمْ الصَّفْقُ فِي الْأَسْوَاقِ. They were making contracts and trades in the markets. Whereas the Ansar, they were busy developing their money. The Ansar were farmers. Medina is a rural area, right? It's about the dates and the palm tree gardens and all of that. So they were busy with that. So he says that while the Muhajirin and the Ansar were busy with their worldly livelihood, I, Abu Hurairah, endured starvation. Like I neglected my own stomach, so that I dedicate every second with the Prophet ﷺ. So I spent much more time than most other people, even though it was over 3 or 4 years. I just maximized everything. Right? And if you do math, so you look at 5,200, divide that over 4 years, it comes out to about 5 hadith a day. Is that possible? Well, it's very possible. And you think being with the Prophet 8 hours a day, he's not going to take 5 bits of information? Every day the Prophet is interacting with people, the Prophet is doing things, and he's just narrating that. He memorized it. Right? So there's nothing unreasonable about what Abu Hurairah did at all. And then in another hadith, the same kind of addressing the same thing, قال قلت يا رسول الله إني أسمع منك حديثا كثيرا أنساه. قال أبسط رداءك فبسطته. قال فغرف بيديه ثم قال ضمه فضممته فما نسيت شيئا بعده. Here, Abu Hurairah went to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, I hear things from you, but I forget. Right? So the Prophet basically made dua for him so that he doesn't forget. And he says, from that moment, I never forgot anything the Prophet ﷺ said. And this is another point. Some people have what we call photographic memories. Anything they hear, they memorize. Or anything they read, they memorize. Like their brain has the ability to take a screenshot of what they saw. So they'll look at this, right? And it's a screenshot in their mind, like a phone. You can, if you take a picture of something at any time, you can go back to it and it's all there. Some people, their brains function this way. And so if you ask them, tell me what the author of this book said on page 300, their brain will pull it up and then they can read it as though they're looking right at it, even though it's right Some people have this. Right? Abu Hurairah had this ability. So if somebody has a photographic memory, how much can they memorize? A lot in a small period of time. So again, there's nothing unscientific here. There's nothing bizarre here. There's nothing miraculous here. وعنه رضي الله تعالى عنه قال حفظت من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعاءين فأما أحدهما فبثثته وأما الآخر فلو بثثته قطع هذا البلعوم. Here Abu Hurairah says, I memorized two types of hadith from the Prophet. One, I taught you all. I shared it with you all. The other category, I concealed it. Okay? Now, that kind of contradicts what we were talking about earlier. Abu Hurairah said that if it wasn't for a hadith, I wouldn't have said anything. Like, he understands the responsibility. He has a responsibility of transmitting this. So why would he conceal? And here we say, but you got to be careful of the wording. He didn't say, I didn't speak about it. He says, فَمَا بَثَثْتُهُ. Beth means to spread. Right? It's like mass transmission. You're sharing it with a lot of people. So he's not saying, I didn't talk about it at all. But he was conscious of who he is teaching. Because some people can misunderstand something. And they use it in an incorrect way. One example of this is the Prophet ﷺ said that whoever returns to Allah believing in La ilaha illallah, they'll go to paradise. This made Abu Hurairah happy. He's like, oh, can I go and teach everyone? The Prophet said, go and teach. And Abu Hurairah is going and he bumps into Omar. And Omar looks at Abu Hurairah. Abu Hurairah looked a little bit excited. What's going on? He said, Rasulullah has said, whoever believes in La ilaha illallah, they'll go to paradise. I'm going to share it with everybody. So Abu Hurairah hit him. Omar hit Abu Hurairah. Right? And Abu Hurairah is like, he get mad. He went back to the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, Omar did this and that. Like, why? So Omar said, if you go teaching people this, they're going to stop acting. They're not going to understand what it means. And the Prophet acknowledged that, yes, he affirmed what Omar did, said, don't share it. Don't mass share it. Right? Now, these hadith are mass shared today. But the idea is Muslims should have picked up on the reality that this doesn't mean believe and you're good. This isn't like Christian salvation, believe Jesus died on the cross and then you're good, do whatever you want. Muslims understand this now. But as people were developing then, especially newer Muslims, they may not have understood this. Especially coming in from certain religions or backgrounds where these concepts were relevant. All right? So this is what Abu Hurairah means here. Now, one final point here. When it comes to Abu Hurairah, we said that there's nothing abnormal about the amount of hadith he memorized. And the fact that Abu Hurairah seems to have had a very strong memorizing ability. Again, nothing strange about the amount he memorized. There's another point here. In the science of hadith, one hadith, every hadith has a chain of narrators, right? Are you all familiar with the concept of chain of narrators? Okay. One hadith can have multiple unique chains. Okay? And so, when the Prophet says something, more likely than not, there are multiple companions listening to this. And each companion would teach their own circle. And then that circle would teach their own circle. And so you have multiple chains. Out of Abu Hurairah's 5,200 hadith, all of them, with the exception of maybe 100 or less, another companion narrated the same exact hadith. So what does that mean? He's not making it up. Like 97%, 98%, if not more, of what Abu Hurairah narrated, another companion is there said, yes, I heard the same exact thing. So this is validating what Abu Hurairah said. So this whole trying to question Abu Hurairah is other nonsense. It's ignorance, to be quite honest. Right? It's silly. Now, the chapter title here is Preserving Knowledge. Knowledge needs to be preserved, right? Part of preserving knowledge is the actual physical preservation. Like here, we're preserving Bukhari by writing it down. Anybody can look and they can find Bukhari. Another part of it is actually teaching it, preserving it in people's actions. So, in the Muslim mind, knowledge is so valuable, so precious that we need to preserve it. And we've gone over already, we've discussed and highlighted the fact that what makes a human being unique, or one of the things that makes a human being unique in comparison to other creatures, is their capacity for knowledge. When the human being loses knowledge, or they don't use their logic, they start doing very bizarre things. Like saying dead meat, a carcass that's been lying there dead, is purer than something you just slaughtered fresh. Right? Why is there slaughter in the first place? What's the point of slaughtering an animal? It's to get the blood out. So Quraysh would say, yeah, the human being killed that makes it bad. Allah killed that's better. What kind of logic is that? The blood is now, it solidifies, and that's not healthy for the human being. It's not. And they're saying that's purer than that. Or they eat pork. With all due respect to all those who eat pork. You look at the animal, it is a disgusting, filthy animal. Medically, research has shown this. Yet they're all over it. Like, I really wonder what sheikh from Christianity gave the fatwa that allowed pork meat. The way I'm imagining it, I didn't do any research on this, but my guess, knowing like the shuyukh circle and how things go down, right? My guess is that a politician, a king, went to the Pope or someone, said, the economy's not doing so well, and pork meat is a lot cheaper. God wants us to be okay, not hungry and whatnot. Make it halal. And I don't think so. I don't know. People are gonna, hey, I'll give you some money. Okay. This is how I imagine it happened. Or else just looking at a pig, there's nothing appetizing about it. This is gross. Right? There's a reason why when we Muslims pass by the pork, it's like, ew. Even the color grosses us out. Right? So, what happened? Human beings behave in very bizarre ways when they lose knowledge, or when they don't apply knowledge. Right? So, preservation of knowledge needs to be at the forefront of the Muslim community. And that includes institutions of knowledge. We need to make sure that the institutions that disseminate knowledge are strong. In America, universities are strong, alhamdulillah. But there's another aspect to them it's very business oriented. And this is the whole idea of divesting, pressuring universities and divesting. Like, there's a corrupt element to it. When you look at the pharmaceuticals, it's as corrupt as the military industry, right? This is all about the money. And you look at these pharmaceutical commercials, and I sound like, does anyone really believe this? Yet doctors say, their patients will come and say, I want you to prescribe me this particular medicine. And the doctor says, it's not for you. It's not for your condition. No, I want this one. Why? Because it's all in a commercial. And look at how the commercials are. It always starts off with somebody who's depressed, sad, in pain, and then they become happy and they're on a boat and they're living their life, right? It's a deception. It's utter deception. And then they start going through the side effects. Yeah, this medicine includes side effects of death and destruction, and you'll lose your life, increased depression. Well, isn't that supposed to relieve my depression? Is that why I'm taking it? Yeah, but you could increase in depression as well. It's business. This is what happens. Or you just look at the medical field, the medical sector. I hear people go down to Mexico. They go down to Mexico to go to the doctors and get surgeries and stuff. I mean, that's just, Americans should be ashamed. It's utter shameful. It's shameful, right? Why? Because it's corrupted. It's no longer about the knowledge and the preservation of knowledge. It's about business. And you know what? To be very blunt, and I've said this, and I'll continue to say it. What we're seeing in American Muslims, especially SoCal Muslims, it's pay to pray. They're calling it. In games, they call it pay to play. If you want to play the game, you have to pay. Right? So the young one understands. You need to pay to play the game. Now Muslims in SoCal are saying masajid are becoming pay to pray. If you want to pray in our masjid, you have to pray. You have to become a member, you have to pay, you have to, right? If you want to learn about Quran, you have to pay, and everything is about paying. To what extent? Like what extent? And masajid are being run like corporations. Yes, masajid need to be financially strong and independent. There's an amana there, right? People are donating their money under the trust that you will use that money in a correct way. But to what extent do we go to making everything about paying? You know, one masjid got a lot of heat because they made like donations for a parking spot. Like if you give a donation, you could have this parking spot reserved for you. Now, no doubt that those who came up, that masjid, it wasn't out of ill intention. They weren't doing it for the wrong reasons, right? But how is it perceived by the community? It doesn't look good, right? So we have to be very careful. Anyway, I can go on forever about that. Next, Bab al-Insat lil-Ulama, the chapter of listening to scholars. Yeah, don't point at me.
We are listening to Islam.
No, you're not.
We have been listening for 7 years now, I think.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
عن جرير بن عبد الله رضي الله تعالى عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال له في حجة الوداع استنصت الناس فقال لا ترجعوا بعدي كفارا يضرب بعضكم رقاب بعض. So chapter about listening to scholars. Be honest. See, my biggest challenge is, my biggest fear is, am I disconnected from the community? And it's what happens a lot with the religious class. They like doing their own thing. They have like the sheikh group. And, you know, they have their way of joking with each other and teasing each other. They speak a completely different language. And then their mindset is different in comparison to other people. Like, we often do not know how the average Muslim even thinks, let alone how they live. Right? So, be honest. What you hear from other people, what is their perception of shuyukh? Be honest. I'm not getting offended. I'm not a sheikh right now.
Square.
Square? What does that mean?
No, they said square, but they only think in the box, you know, they don't go out.
The only thing in the box, right?
Yeah.
It just, they read something in a book written 700 years ago and they just apply it today.
They're not applying to what we're living for. I think that
A lot, right? They're just disconnected, as I was saying. Well, be honest. Tell me. I want to learn. I want to learn. I'm not going to be offended. Because I probably have the same criticisms, by the way.
I did notice that the younger sheikh, they kind of tied into the, today's realities. But the older ones, I had a chance just 3 weeks ago. And, all he talked about was what sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I mean, we like his sunnah and all that. But there was a huge crowd and maybe somebody needed to listen, hear something different, that they are struggling with something. So I noticed that the older sheikh, they focus more on the sunnah of sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the younger ones they kind of bring it like, this is how you apply it. They don't say it, but you can leave with like, okay, I can do this.
Okay.
I don't know if I made the
Sure.
point. Yeah.
What else? I know you all know things. You've all heard things.
Heard what? About you? Or
Not about me, about shuyukh in general.
I made the distinction. I go, those are these two.
You make it, but I'm just asking what you hear from people.
But it depends where the sheikhs are too, I mean, I think here our sheikhs are more like open to the current affairs and how to apply our religion to the
Mhm.
to it. But overseas, it's totally a different story.
Right.
It's and actually, it's very surprising that the Khutbah al-Jum'ah is, and I know this at least in Kuwait. Khutbah al-Jum'ah is every Friday is given by Wazat al-Awqaf.
Yeah.
They are given the khutbah. They can again put it more, they can tweak it.
The topic and the main
But
points and yeah.
Yeah, but it's very surprising that what is good in Mission Villa might not be good in Santa Monica, for example.
Right. So in general, what I hear is that there's a disconnect. What the sheikh is talking about in terms of what people are actually going through and what they need to hear. Part of that is the sheikh's fault, and part of it is the community's fault. Right? A sheikh needs proper mentorship. Like the shuyukh who had stronger mentors, they know how to navigate this because they've seen it in their own teachers. But those who didn't have mentors, they just went into university and whatnot, oftentimes they're oblivious to this. The community's fault is that they don't invest in their community leaders, right? If these imams have the ability to go to universities, to good programs, to actually get that education, to get that experience, to have the freedom they'll be able to pick up those skills, right? So it's not to blame anyone in particular, there's blame on both sides, but what you have here is the following. The Prophet ﷺ in Hajjat al-Wada', right, the farewell sermon, he told Jarir, the companion who's narrating this, he said, Istansit nas, tell people to listen up. The Prophet wants to say something. And what the Prophet said is the following. Of all the things he could have said, he says the following. Do not, like after my death, after my departure, don't go back to being like the kuffar and fighting each other. Like physically fighting each other. Don't do that. So, the bleak reality of Muslim history shows this a lot, unfortunately. But the point I want us to focus on here is, of all the things the Prophet could have said, he said this. So why did he say, like, what made him think? Like, he's talking to the companions. These are the people who were so loyal to the Prophet, were so impacted by the Quran. Nothing can influence them. Nothing. The kings of the world, if they were to gather with all their resources, would not be able to make one companion budge. Why is the Prophet, like what did he see to make him think that this might end up happening? Maybe it's beyond just Allah telling him. Because if this is going to happen, if he knew that like this is going to happen, then what's the point of saying don't do it? What's going to happen? It's the qadr of Allah. So it's as though he understood that there's a tendency within the Muslim ummah to go after each other. And so you'll notice in Islamic history, yes, Muslims have bullied Christians. Yes, Muslims have bullied Jews. But when it comes to like death and destruction, it's always Muslims between each other. Right? Muslims have killed more Muslims than they have Christians or Jews. It's very interesting. Christians have killed everyone, everywhere. Right? They're the most violent. They come and say we're the peace and we're the love. No, that's your secular Western paradigm. Right? That's John Mill and Rousseau and these guys, not your Christian popes and whatnot. Right? So what's the deal? The Prophet made it very clear the Ahl al-Dhimma, Christians and Jews, the minorities are under his protection. Muslims took that to heart. I'm not saying there's never been any friction or any, unacceptable scenarios. But what is it with like us between each other? I think that's a whole topic that needs to be discussed. It needs to. But alhamdulillah, it hasn't always been this way. When the Ottomans came, the Mughals came, these are centuries of stability and peace. Centuries. Before that, it was quite chaotic. Right? So there is a way around this. And it's something to consider. But here the Prophet knew what to say. He knew what to tell the people, because he understood the people. And so, al-insatu lil-ulama. Muslims are thirsty for religious leadership. They're looking for it. Muslims aren't anti-religious leadership. They're not. But they're also not fools. People aren't fools. Like you can't just lie to them and they're just going to believe it. Absolutely not. Right? And in Islam, scholars are praised, but they're not like popes where they're the end-all be-all. You listen to them, you don't question. There's so much of Islam where you have to step up your own game. And so we need scholars who understand what's going on. And that means they need to study marriage. They need to study psychology. They need to study economics. They need to study politics. They need to study history. They study it all. And when you look at the most prominent scholars in our tradition, it's exactly what they did. They weren't just masters of Islam. They understood these other elements. They may not have been the top scholars in these other fields. Obviously not. That's not their primary role. But they understood it enough to be able to have a conversation with these things and put Islam in conversation with these things. Right? So we do listen to scholars, but you all, as community members, have a responsibility of finding a scholar who Allah will be pleased with you if you follow their way. Let's put it that way. And while some people are very critical of shuyukh, there are other people who are just mesmerized by shuyukh. Sheikh and sheikh and sheikh and sheikh. And you just stop. You're not doing yourself a favor, you're not doing them a favor. Wallahi. Respect them. I'm not saying be disrespectful. But don't praise them so much to where they're like abnormal, like they're just superhumans. They're not. They're not. Right? A common Muslim can have more taqwa of Allah than a scholar of Islam. They could. Right? Normally not, but it could be the case. So respect the shuyukh, listen to them, but never kind of take one person, that's it. Look at multiple. And thank them and make dua for them and respect them, but don't praise them so much. Right? So be careful with that. The Prophet says, just don't praise. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for you, it's not healthy for them. Allah Ta'ala alam. We'll go ahead and stop there. Sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. We stopped at Hadith 101. 102.